Welcome everyone to another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardwan. I hope you all are having a great evening. I've got a great panel of guests tonight. To my left, from the Harris County Public Defender's Office, I have Mark Hochglaube. Mark, good evening. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm great. To his left, I have Paul Looney. Paul, how's it going?
It's going all right.
And as always, my co-host, Julio J.V. Vela.
Ready.
What's up, man?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. We could talk about Charlie Strong and all these Miami rumors, but we're going to have to save that for another time. We got more important stuff to get to tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We got a lot of great topics to get to. Great show. We got Paul Looney here, of course, and we're going to talk about the Waco Biker indictments. He's right on the forefront of that. We got a lot of great stuff to get to with what's going on in that case. I want to remind you, we're going to be taking our calls and Twitter all night long. Well, we're going to be taking our calls at 8:30. We'll open up the phone line. 713-807-1794 is the number. You can hit us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. Also, go check out our website, www.hcclatv.com. We have a lot of great information on there. A lot of great blog posts by our defense lawyers who contribute every week. The biggest one right now we have going on, Pat McCann, has written an article about Veterans Court and how and why it works. I encourage everybody to go check it out. It's a great article and gives great insight into a court that not too many people know about. Also coming up at 8:30, we have Matt Elwell. He's going to be doing our 60-second law lesson this week, and he's going to be talking about body cams, and that'll be a great lesson. You can also look for all our past lessons on our website, so go check it out. Guys, I want to start off this week, and Paul, you office out in Waller County.
I've got an office in Waller County and one in Houston.
Yeah, and I want to start here because the big news this week, of course, going back to Waller County and the Sandra Bland investigation, I know you were on the panel that's been kind of selected as an independent counsel or independent panel to investigate.
Well, I'm not really on the panel.
Okay.
The sheriff came to me and asked me if I would put together a group of people, not to investigate Sandra Bland or her death, but to review everything that the sheriff's department does, how they interact with the public, how they respond to calls, their documentation processes, going through and visiting with inmates, sitting and watching the booking processes, everything the sheriff does. We spent time with investigators. He asked me to put together a group of people. I put together a group of people. I'm not really serving on it. I meet with them, but I pulled them together.
Great. I mean, I think it's an important thing. And the story I want to get to this week was, of course, there's a civil lawsuit pending here in federal district court in front of Judge David Hittner that Sandra Bland's mother has filed a wrongful death against the county. And this week, the county and their lawyers filed a 39-page motion for summary judgment, which it's not a big shock that the county and the other defendants would file a motion for summary judgment. I mean, this is pretty standard in all civil cases. Every defendant wants to try and get a case thrown out, and they usually try to find some legal ground to do so. In this case, though, what I found kind of offensive, really offensive.
You found it a little indelicate?
A little bit. And I got it right here in front of me. It starts at the bottom of page 11. Onto the top of page 12, and they detail a lot of the facts around Miss Bland, how she was admitted to the jail, all her records. They've attached a bunch of them as exhibits. But at the bottom of page 11, top of page 12 of this 39-page motion, it says, "It is apparent now that Bland's inability to secure her release from jail and her family and friends' refusal to bail her out of jail led her to commit suicide." I mean, look, I get that lawyers have to make arguments and advocate on behalf of their clients.
Can I speak in behalf of Waller County for a second?
Absolutely.
The lawyer that filed that is not from Waller County. It was far from appropriate. The fact of the matter is the young lady killed herself. There's not anything that's going to bring her back. It's not helping to throw stones at anybody. The jail over there is way obsolete. There's not a facility that I've seen anywhere that has more hazards to the health and safety of the inmates. It was possible for her to have a private area to commit suicide. It was possible for her to have the trash bag available to do it, and it happened. But it doesn't help to blame the mom.
And if I'm not mistaken, the mental health check was, hey, are you feeling okay?
Are you doing all right? Was it something like that? What kind of safeguards did they have in place for this?
They actually did spend a lot of time with this young lady. She got to where people weren't taking her calls, and so they would bring her out and let her call on their phone. Everybody there knew that she was kind of losing her composure, and people in the other cell block were trying to talk to her through the slits, and they would go by and speak to her. It does appear that they were overdue for a personal visit by a factor of a few minutes. I don't know if it would have saved her if they'd have done it or not, but I bet you they don't make that mistake again.
But she had the motion details, and for those of y'all who want to read it, I think you should be able to find it pretty easily if you Google it. But they detail in here about the $5,000 bail and the fact that you know, she would have had to come up with a percentage of that, $515 in this case, in order to get bail.
Well, it was actually going to be cheaper than that. The bail bondsman had said he would take a $200 deposit and get the rest later.
But isn't the real crux of this, guy, is that somebody who can't even afford to make that to get out? I mean, the system is flawed in that sense. I mean, shouldn't this woman have been considered for a PR bond?
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the biggest problems in Harris County too. You know, compared to all the other urban jurisdictions, Harris County's PR percentages, personal root cognizance bond percentages, dramatically lower than everywhere else. And it's, you know, I mean, that's what really is exactly the fault here. I mean, if the county wants to blame her family for not posting that bond, I mean, how can they say that when they could have just as easily given her a PR bond and let her go on their own?
Right. That's what is most striking to me, is that when you look at the facts of her arrest, what she was ultimately charged with, how does she not get a PR bond in this situation? Why are we insistent upon holding somebody like that?
Well, you know, whether we should or shouldn't give PR bonds is a very different discussion than looking at what we actually do. If I give you a few demographics, I'm not sure she would have met any of the standards for a PR bond. She'd been handled before. She was accused of a felony violation involving a police officer. She gave an out-of-state address, and she gave no local references. I'm not sure that I practice law in any jurisdiction that would have given that person a PR bond the first time they saw a magistrate, maybe in a week or two. But I'm not sure any place that I practice with those demographics would have done that. However, that does bring up a bigger discussion. In federal court in this nation, I would hazard a guess that probably 2/3 of the people never get a bond.
Right.
And many of those people go from no bond to a camp where there's not even a wall. In state courts, we give bonds punitively. This being arrested means that your primary punishment is probably going to come on the front end. And that's just wrong.
Well, in this case, it certainly seems like her punishment was on the front end.
And it was permanent.
Yeah. That's what gets me to some degree about this, is the facts of how she was arrested, the stop itself. And, you know, when they put stuff like this in a filing, it's offensive to me.
I couldn't agree more, but again, that lawyer wasn't from Waller County.
Are the lawyers alleging gross negligence? What are they alleging that the Waller County jail or sheriff didn't do?
Yeah, it's a wrongful death case, and you know, obviously standard of care and breach of the standard of care and negligence and all the typical stuff that you find in that. And of course, the county, rightfully so, has asserted, saying, look, we've got governmental immunity, we need to get out of this. But okay, assert your governmental immunity. Don't take personal shots at a family for their, you know, either inability or unwillingness to participate in a system that, frankly, guys, it oppresses poor people. Let's be honest. I mean, that's what it does. And who knows? We don't know what their ability to even help out was. They want to blame it on them, but we don't know what their ability was to help out in this situation.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think, you know, I can't speak to Waller County so much as I can speak to Harris County, as I'm I work in the public defender's office here in Houston. But, I mean, I know that with Harris County, they're trying to reevaluate the entire bond schedule, which, you know, has been, exactly as Paul said, oppressive and sort of mindlessly oppressive at that. You know, it doesn't really take into consideration whether the person is a risk to the community, whether the person is a flight risk. It just says, this is the charge, this is your bond, and sit in jail until you get it figured out. And, you know, my experience prior to working in the public defender's office was that places like Waller and you know, I did work in Brazoria and Chambers and other sort of the suburban counties, you know, they take an even sort of more draconian look at a perspective of bonds. And it, I mean, this is sort of the ultimate tragedy that can come from that.
Is there a bond schedule out there in Waller County? Like in Harris County, I think you might be able to speak to some of the felony bonds and how and what we usually see them at. But in Waller County, is there some bond schedule that's followed out there, or is it just kind of?
The district attorney has been working on a bond schedule for a while. It's not as formal as it is here. It depends on who magistrates somebody. The bond may be outrageous, and other times it's much less than you would have expected. It's very erratic. Mm-hmm. The way to get bond in Waller County at a reasonable rate is to be able to hire a lawyer and have that lawyer call the judge and walk over and get a bond reduction. Well, that's kind of limited to people who can hire a lawyer.
Mark,
because you're not going to get an appointed lawyer that fast.
Yeah. Mark, at the PD's office, are there public defenders available at the magistrate level to help out with making arguments of bond?
No, not yet. And that's one of the things, you know, the MacArthur Foundation has been sort of, Harris County has been sort of trying to get a grant out of the MacArthur Foundation to reduce the jail population safely. And to the Harris County District Attorney's credit, I mean, the idea is not just to safely reduce the jail population, but to do it with particular attention to minorities who are, you know, disproportionately affected by the bond schedule. And so one of the recommendations to the MacArthur Foundation that hopefully will get them to give the county some money to pay for this is that they have public defenders at the probable cause court hearing. And I mean, and we've studied, you know, in other jurisdictions. We've looked in Denver and in Maryland and Miami. And I mean, just having an attorney there that can make a couple sentences on the person's behalf to say, look, Judge, this person's got a safe place to go. They're not going to be a danger to anybody. I mean, it makes, statistically, it just makes a humongous difference.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, is given the amount of cases we have, what do you think could be the relative effectiveness of that in Harris County?
I mean, I think it could be huge. You know, it's going to take something of a culture change, because right now, you know, the judges at PC, I mean, the only thing they can do is screw up, right? I mean, if they give somebody a PR bond and they don't come to court, they run the risk of the judge from that court, you know, getting mad at them. Then the judge never gets happy with them because they gave them a PR bond, or happy with them because they raised the bond. And so, you know, the mindset at probable cause court is just set the bond on the bond schedule and, you know, push it off until the person actually arrives in court. And, you know, unfortunately, that starts this snowball rolling down the hill straight away, which the person never had any help. And, you know, I mean, it is a confrontational hearing, and they never had assistance of counsel at that hearing. They end up going to court where they finally get an attorney appointed, but by that point, you know, there's already been a magistrate that approved a bond, and it's going to take someone to reverse that to get to what is a just level.
One of the things that I've always found peculiar, at least in Harris County, is how they go about setting these bonds. Like you say, they can only mess up. And so, for example, like with drugs, you know, a lot of times if it's a kilo of coke, they say, well, what's the street value of the cocaine or heroin?
Right.
I want to know where that street is.
Yeah, well, and I'm going to double it. And this, yeah, I mean,
I've got clients that need to move to that street.
Yeah, and it's just, and so you're stuck there going back to court arguing, saying, Judge, first of all, a kilo of Coke on the street does not cost this amount, okay? And if it did, we got to get there. But
I know.
But you see what I'm saying? And so what do you see, or do you see things in your felony experience? What are some other things that pop out to you about how bonds are set? I mean, we have the drugs, but are there other aggravating factors that you see that?
Sure. I mean, you know, the DA's office, of course, they have their bond schedule, and to be fair, there is a valid reason for the bond schedule that is pro-defendant, which is that some people, you know, they get a bond set when the warrant's issued, they can go make a non-arrest bond. Right. Right? Whereas if the warrant just goes out, you get arrested, you have to wait to get in front of a judge to set the bond, and that hurts defendants. But you know, you see these situations where, you know, a person's accused of theft, you know, and maybe they were a minor participant in some scheme that amounted to $100,000 stealing, and so the DA's office says, well, we're going to assess the bond at twice whatever the person stole, you know, and for all we know, that charge came 5 years ago. The person has none of that money now, and I mean, the overriding assumption is that somehow they kept all of that money. They can make twice as much of a bond. I mean, it's specifically punitive by design.
One of our viewers on Twitter just hit us up, and going back to your point, Paul, about not getting a court-appointed lawyer that quick, they wanted to know why not, and they want to know when you're entitled to an appointed lawyer. And I guess that brings up a bigger question, too, going back to it. I mean, most people don't get an appointed lawyer until they've filled out an affidavit of indigency, right? Right.
And, you know, and one of the things that Harris County does well, it gets people to court quickly. I mean, you'll see in some of the outlying counties, people, you know, wait weeks or months, you know, before they ever even have the opportunity to get a court-appointed lawyer, you know, which is just a disaster. But in Harris County, they are good at getting people to court promptly and at least offering them a court-appointed attorney, typically within a matter of 2 or 3 days, you know, depending. There's some circumstances where it takes a little longer, but usually that quickly. And I mean, I still think they should have an attorney just accessible to them at the bond hearing, you know, which is supposed to happen within 24 hours. But you know, Harris County is actually not bad at getting people to court and getting them offered at least a court-appointed attorney.
Those types of things are a lot easier to do in Harris County than in the outlying counties. It's fiscally inconceivable that the smaller counties around Texas can have a defense lawyer come in for the one person that got arrested that week, because that person may have to drive 45 miles. The county's going to spend a lot of money doing it. I think the way that this is ultimately going to happen in a manner to where it really works for the public, the taxpayer, and for the accused is that we're going to have video magistration. And with video magistration, you can have a lawyer in a remote location. You can have the inmate sitting in the location in the jail. You can have the magistrate, and you can have this happen very contemporaneous with the booking process. And the lawyer fee wouldn't have to be very high because you can Skype in from anywhere. And I think that's probably how we're going to ultimately address it in the rural areas.
I think you should be entitled to a lawyer at the first adversarial type of hearing. I mean, you should, and that would be right around when they're coming in setting that bond, or even when they're talking about PC. I'd imagine that would be you'd be able to present evidence contrary to PC and attack that too. And I think over at the PD's office, you guys are making great strides in putting lawyers at the ground level with this new inmate processing center that's kind of coming out, and to have a lawyer on the ground level would be game changing.
I'd love to see your technology, Paul, come to fruition, because as we know, the criminal justice system is just so slow to adapt to technology. I mean, we still don't even have e-filing at the state criminal system.
One of the things that I think the Bland Sheriff's Commission is going to recommend is video conferencing for medical screening, where you can have a bunch of these counties pool together and have one doctor or one practice that is actually servicing a lot of counties. And when an inmate is being processed, the physician or the ENT will do the screening. These things are financially possible through video conferencing, and we can do the same thing with swift magistration, with lawyers, and we can keep the cost down to where it's just not prohibitive. Right now, it's pretty prohibitive in the rural areas.
But you know, I mean, you talk about the expense of having a lawyer there, and I understand why it's prohibitive, certainly looking at how much a lawyer costs. But then you think about, well, that person's bond stays too high. That person stays in jail for however long. The county pays for that needlessly. And
it does, but here's the sad financial truth about docket management. People that don't make bond plead out fast. People that make bond occupy court time because they want to go in there and they want to see the evidence and they want to see the proof. And if there's a flaw, they want to have a motion to suppress. And if they're innocent, they want to have a trial. People that don't make bond plead guilty anyway just to get out of the jail.
Yeah.
And so I do think that from a purely money perspective, it's cheaper to leave everybody in until you force them into submission than it is to give them due process.
It's tragic.
I don't know if that's true. I got to say, I mean, because you think about these people, like you say, right? The evidence might not be there, and they end up signing. Maybe they got charged with a significant quantity of drugs. We're looking at 25 years in prison.
Well, for the felonies, I agree it's not true. But the vast majority of the cases are misdemeanors. And for those, I think it's true.
Because most of the time you get time served after spending 2 or 3 days.
It's cheaper to keep them in until they submit and go home.
As tragic as this case is, I mean, I think it's good that we're discussing these things, and hopefully solutions like yours, Paul, come out of a situation like this.
Did you think of that, the video conferencing?
I might.
That's brilliant.
I might.
Brilliant, man.
Brilliant. I want to turn, guys, to an update since we have Mr. Looney here on the Waco Twin Peaks biker indictments because you're making some news this week, Paul. You've asked for a speedy trial and want your guy put to trial as soon as possible.
Well, I think it's in the interest of the judges. I think it's in the interest of the taxpayers of McLennan County. I think it's in the interest of prosecutors. The entire case on almost everybody that's indicted, and right now they've got 106 indicted, they promise more to come. But the entire case on most of those centers around a very novel legal theory. A, that every motorcycle club there was a criminal street gang under the legal definition of criminal street gangs, and B, that the individuals in support of this criminal effort showed up there as a member of that gang in a show of force. Just showing up there was supportive of the criminal endeavor by being a show of force. Nobody's ever been prosecuted for that theory in the state of Texas. I don't believe it'll hold water. The district attorney that's in charge of the case over there is a very bright man, board-certified criminal law specialist. He thinks it will hold water. He's a very worthy adversary. I think a little demented, but a very worthy adversary. We need a test case. I don't need any more discovery. My client is absolutely innocent. I don't need a change of venue. I'll take any 12 jurors anywhere. I'm ready to go to trial tomorrow. Let's get a test case. If I win, I'm sure the state's going to appeal if the judge denies them their instruction that they can get a conviction on just being there. I'm sure the state will appeal. If I lose, I'm sure going to appeal. There's a procedure where we can ask to bypass the Court of Appeals and go straight to the Court of Criminal Appeals. I think we should join in a request for that. Try the case in December. Send it to the Court of Criminal Appeals in February, brief the thing between February and April, and let's get a ruling on this thing by summer and find out if this theory of prosecution has any merit. If it doesn't have any merit, they'll have to dismiss almost all those cases.
Do you think realistically you can get a December trial date?
Why not? I just need like 4 days.
Well, that's what I mean. I'm asking. I mean,
I've got a judge. I've got a judge who says he's not on vacation in December, and a whole prosecutor's office full of people that surely one of them's not on vacation. Let's do a trial.
Are all of the bikers indicted or being accused of the same offense, same type of offense, or does it like?
If we take the prosecutor at his word, they worked diligently for 9 hours Monday before last, and they returned 106 indictments. Well, if nobody even stopped to pee, that means that everybody got 5 minutes each in the consideration of their case, a case that can put them to prison 15 years to life. They got 5 minutes each. And then, in the end, we get all of these pieces of paper, indictments. They're absolutely identical, every one of them, except the name.
So you can't handle with a motion to quash, you don't think?
No, because they've got a right to put on their evidence to see if they can prove that these are criminal street gangs. And then they've got a right to put on whatever evidence that they have that indicates that there was some type of a supportive effort to further the criminal activity of this alleged criminal street gang.
But does it plead show of force as
no
action?
No, but it doesn't. But I had an examining trial, and we fleshed out the theory of the case, and the prosecutor is quick to admit that's his theory of the case. But it's not in the indictment. If it was in the indictment, I could litigate the indictment.
Yeah. And is it engaging in organized crime or criminal activity?
For everybody.
For everybody.
For everybody.
Do you see, I mean, you see a lot of these felonies. What's the most people you've seen kind of roped into this kind of engaging in criminal activity?
Nothing approaching this. Nothing approaching this. I mean,
I got up to 4 one time.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, typically you're dealing with a handful of people. Yeah.
What is it about Waco? What?
I don't know. The first time I went to Waco was with the Branch Davidians, and that's when I first realized that no matter how much you search your law library, if you don't find the Book of Waco, you can't perform adequately in that town because they follow a set of rules that they all know the rules over there, and they look at you like you're just an idiot. But I spend weekends going from bookstore to bookstore to bookstore. I want the Book of Waco. I can't find it. It's the most un-American town in our soil.
How is this going to play out, Paul? I mean, you've got 106 people now. They've got, what, 177 total that they've got charged, you know, so they're obviously going to bring some more indictments. I mean, this thing's going to take years to process all these cases.
It is unless they go with my plan to send a stalking horse and run the theory of prosecution to the Court of Criminal Appeals and let's get a decision. If I lose and the Court of Criminal Appeals says that's a valid theory and all of you people are going to get convicted, people will start scrambling for plea bargains. If I win, they're going to have to dismiss the cases. We can get out of the quagmire quickly doing it this way. I can't think of any other method that this is mechanically achievable.
I mean, this is fascinating. I really want to see how this plays out. I hope you do get the trial date in December. Because
going over there, everybody is waiving arraignment. I'm not going to waive arraignment because it's another opportunity to try to get them to agree to the speedy trial. When I gave it to the judge, I think it's fair to say he was mildly intrigued with the possibilities. I'm not sure that they're going to rule this out.
I'd like to see it. This is going to be interesting to watch. Very interesting to watch. We've reached 8:30. I want to remind y'all, we're going to open up our phone lines here. 713-807-1794 is the number. We put it at the bottom of the screen. Also, send us your questions and comments on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. But right now, we are going to have our 60-second law lesson with Matt Elwell talking about the need for body cameras.
Hi, I'm Matt Elwell, and today I want to talk to you about body cameras. Body cameras are a great tool that defense attorneys can use to gather evidence in a client's case. But more importantly, body cameras can be used by police departments to make sure that their officers are doing the right thing every time. Just the other day, a police officer in Ohio was indicted for murder because he used unlawful force on a suspect. The only reason that officer was indicted was because of the body camera footage. Now, I don't want anything like that to happen to the citizens of Harris County. I invite HPD and the Harris County Sheriff's Office to start implementing body cameras out there with their officers. After all, they've got nothing to hide. My name is Matt Elwell, and this has been your 60-second law lesson.
Great law lesson. Again, if you are interested in seeing some of our past 60-second law lessons, go to our website, hcclatv.com. And again, our phone lines are open. 713-807-1794 is the number. Give us a call right here for Mark Hochglaube and Paul Looney, and of course, J.V. Vela. You're still doing the hook 'em horns, aren't you?
Hey, man.
You're not giving up.
Till we die.
God.
Till I die.
They did die, didn't they?
Yeah,
Hey, look, we're here to
on
talk
life
about criminal
support
law,
right now.
okay?
We're
Bevo, when last seen, was on his side and a horn pointing.
we do not disrespect the Bevo, okay?
Guys, I want to talk about this this article that came in the Atlantic this week, and it talked about whether or not the big money that's propping up judicial elections is behind the harsh sentences. Oh, we have a phone call coming in too. Let's get to this in a moment. I want to see. This is the first time we've had a phone call right at 8:30, so let's take it. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
Thank you. My question has to do with something Mr. Looney said that I found quite disturbing, and I'm hoping I just misunderstood something. It had to do with people that are unable to make bond, and to get out of jail, they'll plead out, save the county money, and helps clear the docket. But it seems grossly unfair, since there is a process that they can go through. Particularly, there will be innocent people who may just get me out of jail and plead guilty because they'll get time served, when that obviously wouldn't be in the best interests of themselves, other than just getting out of jail. So it just sounds like that attitude, well, it's just another thing that works against those who are impoverished or just can't afford to have a lawyer, and it sort of forces them into a corner. So I'm hoping I misunderstood that.
Well, thanks for the call. I don't think you misunderstood at all. I mean, those the four of us who have been around doing these cases for a long time now. I mean, we see it every day, unfortunately, guys. I mean, people would rather just go ahead and get out and plead guilty to something, even if they didn't do it, no matter what we tell them.
The fact of the matter is that we've got so many people in the system that the judges and the prosecutors and the bailiffs and everybody that works in the courtroom, they're just trying to get through their day. And if they let these things stack up to the point of giving them full and fair hearings and actual due process, they're overwhelmed. We have criminalized so much of our behavior in the last 30 years that wasn't previously criminal. And they keep jamming them in the same courts without giving many extra courts. We're going to have to do something about decriminalizing a lot of the behaviors that we've criminalized, so that we don't have as many people getting arrested for lifestyle choices. And we've got to do something about the notion that a judge gets elected or doesn't get elected based upon whether they keep their docket cleared out. There's some changes that have to be made, because this is just horrible.
Yeah, I want to get to that, because going back to the Atlantic article I started on before we got the phone call, it asks the question of whether or not the big money in judicial elections and state elections are behind a lot of the harsh sentences. And the article points out that the tough on crime moniker is the most common political theme aired amongst all the states. That's what people run on, and they're constantly running on that. And you mentioned, Paul, about the judges are concerned about moving their docket, and that's part and parcel to this. And Julio and I were talking before the show about the need to probably make nonpartisan elections.
I don't even know if elections are a good idea of any kind. The public is not in a position to determine whether or not a person has the judicial temperament, the wisdom, the experience to be able to control a courtroom. It's just highly inappropriate for people to be voting on those people, in my opinion.
Well, and you can want to be tough on crime as a political stance, but that's not really a judge's role.
You're supposed to be the administrator of a fair and just system. I've never seen anybody run for the bench on that platform. I've never seen it.
I mean, I can remember seeing civil judges running on the platform of being tough on crime. And
Mark, I mean, you going in there like a trial warrior, do you see judges treating you differently because you, of what you represent, the office that you represent? Do they treat you differently? Do they see they treat you differently, or do they just know you're a trial warrior and you're just going to go in there and fight? I mean, coming from versus, someone who goes in there who may be donating to a campaign or has as a big donor or as a big backer of some of the issues that the judge is in. I mean, do you see any of that, or in your experience have?
I'm skeptical that contributions are what causes judges to be tough on crime. I mean, I think that if you think about what the judges do personally when they're campaigning, and almost all the judges in Harris County, the vast majority, are Republican, so they go to these Republican primary, events, and the Republican primary events draw the most conservative of the Republican Party to them. And I mean, you just think about being around that type of element consistently, day in and day out, for months on end. And I mean, I think it affects your perspective. And I think, unfortunately, some of the Republican Party apparatus that you simply have to court when you're running for office. I think that they are looking for tough on crime. I don't think that they've really come to their senses. I think, ironically, with the Koch brothers now sort of developing a more, certainly a better perspective of criminal justice, maybe the Republican Party will see some progress.
Well, it's interesting you say that because, the Ninth Circuit Judge Kozinski has been part of their Criminal Justice Act reform project, and he's made some pretty sweeping statements about prosecutorial misconduct, about the militarization of police, and just the failures of the system overall and the need for reform. But I saw something interesting, and that was that people were trying to call out the Koch brothers and say, this is just a self-serving thing, because what they're really trying to do is back in some legislative reform on white-collar crime, and to make it tougher to prosecute white-collar crime, and to somehow lessen the sentences on white-collar crime. So the counterpoint to that was that while the Koch brothers are out there doing this, and they're bringing Judge Kozinski in and making it look all good and putting the nice flowery appearance on it, that they really have ulterior motives.
And so they're planning for their own indictments? And
no, they're planning to avoid their own indictments.
I mean, I guess,
I don't think that the Koch brothers have ever been supportive of any candidate that I've ever voted for. But it's just the height of paranoia to suggest that they're involved in anything criminal. I have never heard a rumor of any improper activity on behalf of either one of them. I hate that kind of paranoia. I hate that kind of speculation.
Yeah. We got another call coming in. I want to jump over the phone lines. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt. Thanks for the call.
Yeah, hi Jimmy. How you doing tonight?
Great. How are you?
Great. This is Bryce. I just called in to talk about the Koch brothers, and with that Kozinski, with that judge, I don't know if how much they paid him to go on and say that. He talks about a number of things, and I have to agree with a lot of it about a reduction in time and that kind of thing. But the officers, the militarization of the cops, officers' attitudes, they change with the use of decommissioned military craft, and you see it everywhere, from that Jade Helm thing that went on this summer and on and on. But why would the Koch brothers jump on this now and get Kozinski, that judge, in on this whole thing? Your thoughts?
Yeah, it is kind of interesting. I mean, he's been, I guess the reason from my perspective why they would bring him in is because he's been definitely the most outspoken of the federal judges about the need for reform. I mean, he's written several scathing opinions on prosecutorial misconduct and hiding Brady material, and I mean, he's come at him. I mean, he's made some pretty aggressive statements, to the point that the DOJ this past week even wrote a response memo, which is never done. I mean, the DOJ doesn't respond to judges who call them out. That just doesn't happen. So, you know, I mean, the caller makes some good points on why are they bringing him into this, but.
Have you ever seen the Koch brothers interviewed in depth?
I haven't seen the in-depth, but I mean, I've seen some interviews of them.
These guys are reasonable men that have political differences with me. But they're reasonable men, and they want the country to be in better shape. I don't think there is any family that's been more philanthropic than they have been. They are both very articulate and well-educated on national issues and local issues. I think they just don't want prosecutors engaging in misconduct, and I don't think they want their police officers acting like they're Marines. I don't think it's anything any deeper than that. I think they want a better society. I really wish they would support my candidates. They don't. But I think all they really want is a better society.
One of the things that, dovetailing onto what you said, the judge says that, hey, you know, we're criminalizing too many things. There's a lot of times when you end up being charged with some conduct, criminal conduct, that you don't even know that you're engaging in. One of the points he brought up was the accounting firm Arthur Anderson, who they, you know, it turns out that, you know, they got criminally charged, convicted, took it all the way up to the court, the Supreme Court, and turns out they weren't engaging in any criminal activity at all. But
well, they were for a year or two before it got overturned, and then they weren't.
Right. Yeah. Right. And it goes back to just the over-criminalization, and I think the legislature is going to have to pull back on a lot of things before we see any real difference.
Well, and the other thing he talked about was mandatory minimums and the need to change that. And we have mandatory minimums exist mostly at the federal level, even for first-time offenders. There's very few at the state level for first-time offenders, but there's quite a bit if you're habitual when we get to the point of mandatory minimum. But that's a big component too, isn't it, guys?
Sure.
I mean, if we eliminated mandatory minimums, that changes the whole spectrum.
You know, I was looking at a statute this afternoon on a sexual offense. The statute was 4.5 pages. Just the statute was 4.5 pages long. The first time I saw a penal code was in 1978, and you could read it on your lunch hour. Wow. Now the little things about that thick, and go to the health and safety code and you can find some more crimes, and go to the transportation code and you can find some more crimes. I don't have any clue what all's against the law. Do any of y'all?
It's hard to keep track of.
If you do some research.
I don't even know where to do all the research to figure out what all's against the law.
It's in the book of Waco, man.
We got another call coming in. Let's jump over to our phone lines. Hello, welcome to Reasonable Doubt.
Hello, good show.
Thank you.
About the Koch brothers, don't forget that they have plenty of Democrats that they've supported, like Bill Clinton. He came from a Southern Governors Association, which was a Koch brothers invention. So they're not. Yeah, and also, why are all politicians and the comparison between Democratic and Republicans so abysmal when it comes to the drug war that they just have blinders on and they can't hear? I'll hang up. Good show.
Thanks for the call. I mean, I think the reality is, guys, if you're a donator, if you're a large contributor, you're going to play both sides because you never know who's going to be in power. You can't. I mean, you can't account for what an election's going to do. And
what do you think, Paul?
I do that, don't y'all? I'm just a little bitty fish, but I try to swim in a successful pond.
Yeah, I mean, it was a lawyer. Goes back to my initial statement about the Waller County's lawyers. I understand the need to advocate, and I don't think as a lawyer you should pin yourself into being one party or another, because you may have to make another argument on behalf of a client that may be counter. So you don't want to box yourself in too much.
How many, going back to drugs, how many felony drug cases do you see, or does the PD come across? Are you all usually fighting those? Do you see a lot of those versus aggravated robberies or burglaries, what's your opinion on them? I mean, are you seeing a lot of drug cases? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're seeing trace cases, and we're seeing the less than a gram cases, and you know, I mean, to your point, and sort of tying in even with the Bland situation. I mean, you look at the over-criminalization and the sort of pressure that puts on police to over-police the particularly minority communities, and you know, it's brought a backlash, and it's brought a lot of distrust, and you know, and it couldn't be more evident than in the Bland situation, where you see this trooper who, you know, it's clear from the video, he was just trying to write her a warning. He wasn't even going to write her a ticket at the outset, but her initial reaction, which is completely understandable, was that this guy is picking on me because I'm black. And you could see these two ships crossing in the night, and it ends in this terrible tragedy.
Well, and the trooper followed that up by giving her the keys to his emotional condition. He lost it. I mean, he doesn't have any business on the streets with a badge and a gun.
Does he still have a badge and a gun?
Well, I'm sure he's got one in the drawer somewhere. He's on suspension at the moment.
Julio, one of our viewers is sending in some messages to me saying that you're sitting in the pumpkin patch tonight.
Hey, man, I got to be home before midnight. I don't know. That's all I got. I don't know. I'm pumpkin patch. I don't know, man.
Come on, man. You got to think better on
I'm working on it. I know.
I got this big horn thing going on in the background.
I see it now. I see it now.
This is our Thanksgiving background, ladies and gentlemen. We have to thank our president, Joanne Music, for coming up with this background as we're going into the holidays this week. She's quite the talented Photoshop artist for adding in graphics. So, Joanne, thank you very much for adding in the graphics. And we'll have another one for Christmas, too.
I tried to do a Turkeyzilla coming through the buildings.
Turkeyzilla.
No, the show is the turkey.
The show, that's right. You know, we were talking about having like the Gobble Awards, the top 5 turkeys. Yeah. You know, and
I'm gonna be number 1.
Guys, this is kind of a morbid topic to go into, but I think it needs to be talked about from our perspective. Of course, last week the attack in Paris by the terrorist group ISIS, and I wonder, watching all the reaction, my first thought was, how is this going to play out in terms of what happens to our continuing erosion of the Fourth Amendment here? I mean, are we going to continue to see laws even more strict than the Patriot Act and start to give up things? I mean, what do you guys see as the fallout of this?
You know, I think it's too early to tell, and I'm hopeful that it's not. You know, certainly, I mean, as terrible as Paris was, I mean, I don't think it compares to the way 9/11 affected us, just sort of on a visceral level. I mean, I think everybody remembers the moment where they were when
right.
they heard about the towers. And I don't know that it quite had that sort of impact at the heart. Hopefully it didn't, that it sort of scares people into, you know, wanting to forfeit their Fourth Amendment rights just on a political basis.
I'm terrified that the lifestyle that I grew up enjoying will never be available to my grandchild, my great-grandchildren, because people panic now. In order to be safe, the mass will just throw their rights in the river. In order to be safe, the masses will say, arrest him. Do whatever you have to do. Keep me safe. What has happened that has made our society value safety more than it values the sanctity of why we exist? I'm afraid that we have let public paranoia destroy the integrity of freedom to the point to where we'll never experience it again.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, one of the first things that I read after this was about the CIA coming out and saying, hammering out their line about how we need backdoor on all the encryptions, and they should have a backdoor to get in with your cell phones, with your emails, with everything. I mean, basically the CIA wants every major corporation for all your electronic devices, to ensure this backdoor where they can get in.
I get the CIA want it, but what shocks me and really concerns me is that all my neighbors want them to have it.
Exactly. That's what gets me, Paul, is that we're just, because every time you think you read a good case about the Fourth Amendment where a district judge suppresses some evidence on either a faulty warrant or even a warrantless search, and you think, oh, there's hope. There's hope here because, you know, we still have judges who are following the law. But then you get opinions like what we got from the Fifth Circuit a couple years ago, basically saying, look, you have the right to not have a cell phone if you don't want to have a cell phone, completely ignoring the fact that you need a cell phone to participate in modern day society. And I just worry that we're giving up, like you said, in the sake of safety and just to keep the status quo, just to keep our SUVs and our flat screen TVs.
I think, what's that quote? It says, those who are willing to give up freedom for liberty deserve neither, or those that give up liberty for freedom deserve neither, as from Benjamin Franklin, something of that nature. Mm-hmm. But it's the same type of concept. I mean, the article goes in to say that the CIA and the government wants all these backdoor kind of capabilities so they can track and monitor terrorism and these kind of things. But in reality, they already do that. I mean, if you pick up your cell phone and you're making a call and you're trying to get away somewhere or doing something, they're going to be able to pinpoint those. And I'm sure you've had experience how they triangulate the cell phone. Can you explain that? Because I find that fascinating how they do that. Do y'all know anything about that?
Well, and I don't know the technology, but I know that, you know, basically when you have your cell phone, it's pinging off a tower, and it depends on how many other cell phones are pinging off the towers nearby. But basically, as often as it's pinging off one tower, it may be pinging off another tower in the opposite direction, or another in the third direction still. And depending on how frequently it's pinging off each tower, they can generalize where the cell phone is likely located.
And I think that sometimes they can even, when they can triangulate your position. So if you use the phone and you're trying to say you're somewhere else, but they'll get you into at least a general vicinity of where you're at, and then even sometimes even track which direction that you're moving in. I guess by the way they triangulate that. And I don't think very many people get it that, you know, we have so many times in clients they're using their cell phones, and it's just that does them in.
Yeah.
But that's for people that are committing a crime.
Right.
If I manage to make the rest of the day without committing a crime, I'm still monitored. And I'm sick of it.
I feel the exact same way. I mean, I hate this line of, but I'm not doing anything, so go get the bad guys. I got nothing to hide. It's not about having anything to hide. It's about, you shouldn't be able to, you can't come in without a warrant, you know, and if you're going to, you got to meet certain prerequisites. And backdoors into my email, backdoors into my cell phone, that's not what our Fourth Amendment's about, is it?
I didn't see it when I read it, but I do. But I do reserve the right to acknowledge that there are books I can't find.
You know what's awesome, and we go back to something that we talked about a couple shows back, that what's the last line of defense from government intrusion or from government tyranny? It's us. It's the defense lawyers. Because we're the guys that government thinks about before they come and break down that door, or before they go and arrest, that, oh, we got to get a warrant first. And the more you're doing what you're doing in Waco, and the more that you're doing at the PD's office, and the more you're doing at the federal courthouse, and the more I just talk about everybody else, we're doing the job. We're fighting. We're on the last line, because if we're not fighting for these people, no one is.
That's all well and good. But right now, we need to figure out why the public is ready to surrender.
Yeah, because
and I really don't get it.
I don't either, because, you know, you watch some of these Kaczynski videos on the Koch brothers site, and it's just, it's really good stuff, particularly about the militarization of the police. And I worry that every time we have an incident like this, it adds to the fuel of, well, this is why we need to give the police assault rifles and tanks and you know, all these armored vehicles to roll around in.
Do you think there's ever been a federal judge that is widely despised as much as Kaczynski is? The public does not like what he's doing and saying.
Sure.
He's putting a spotlight on an ugly baby that everybody wants to love. And they don't like the spotlight.
No, they don't.
One of the things I thought he said was great was, you know, we don't want to give, this society doesn't want to give people second chances in reality. And so they keep bringing up a mistake that somebody made 10, 15 years ago that probably shouldn't have been criminalized in the first place, but they never want to let it go. And it's hurting us. It's hurting us as a people.
Yeah, we love to give our politicians a second chance and everything, but we don't want to give people who get wrapped up in the criminal justice system a second chance.
Neither one of you guys have near the gray hairs that I do. So you haven't likely been practicing law as long as I might have. Do either one of you ever hear the following phrase? Ever? He paid his debt to society.
No.
Does anybody ever say that anymore?
Very rarely.
I haven't heard it.
Very rarely.
That used to be the standard we lived by when it came to rehabilitating somebody that had paid their debt.
We only got 30 seconds left, guys. I want to thank Mark Hochglaube, Paul Looney for joining us tonight. You guys have been great. Need to have you guys back on the show. Julio?
Hey.
I don't care what they say. You look great in the pumpkin patch.
I like it. I like it. It's good.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are off next week, but we will be back the following week with an all-new episode of HCCLA's Reasonable Doubt. I want to thank Paul Looney, Mark Hochglaube, and Julio Vela. We'll see you December 3rd. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.
Great show.
How